All right, today I'm going to do an intro to chapter 2. We're going to talk about order of operations and the distributive property. You guys don't need to put this in your notes, but I want you to try to see if you can figure out how to solve this problem. All right, Cade, what do you think the answer is? 13. Who's got another answer? What'd you get?
I got
18. How many of you would say you got 13 or 18? All right, so here's what I got. For some people, I can see you said 5 plus 4 is 9. This little dot is times 2, and they got 18. How many of you would raise your hand and say you got that? All right, interesting scenario. This is not correct. Instead, what you should have done, according to order of operations, is multiplication should go first every single time before you add. Class, what's 4 times 2? 8. And then you need to drop that part down. And what's 5 plus 8? 13. Today I am going to explain to you how you can figure out that this is the method you should do every time instead of that first method. So what I want you guys to really understand is this thing that it says at the top. Order matters. Now I'm going to use this lady right here. Her name is Aunt Sally. Aunt Sally is going to help us to understand order of operations. Everyone say, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. All right, so you can see right here I've got P, E, M, D, A, S. We're going to use this to help us to remember the order we have to do things in whenever we are doing different things with math problems. Everybody say it one more time. Go ahead. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Now I want you guys to go ahead and take your red pens out. The first thing you're writing here is PEMDAS. Notice the letters P-E-M-D-A-S. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's going to help us to remember this order. So I want you to pull out your red pen and go ahead and write down this slide in your notes. The P in PEMDAS stands for parentheses. Now parentheses can come in a number of forms. It could look like normal parentheses, it could look like brackets, or it could be a fraction bar. Basically what this is saying is if there's anything in parentheses like this, 3 plus 2, you would want to do that first. In the case of a fraction bar like this, imagine I had something in parentheses and it says 10 divided by 2. Guys, what is that? 5, okay? So I would need to do the work inside of those parentheses, or I would need to do that fraction bar first. Next up, we've got exponents. A lot of times people will look at this right here and they will say that means 3 times 2. Does that mean 3 times 2? No. It does not. I want you to go and take your pencil and write a little arrow over here to the side. That means 3 times itself. So that would be 3 times 3, okay? So the way that you would say this, you don't say 3 to a tiny little 2. Instead, you would say 3 squared, okay? What would 4 squared mean? 4 times 4. What does 5 squared mean, class? 5 times 5. What does 10 squared mean? 10 times 10. So exponents would be the second thing that we do when we're using order of operations. The next up is multiplication and division. Now this is where people get tricked up. I want you to notice that when I wrote PEMDAS, I did not write P-E and then an M on top of a D or an A on top of an S. Notice that you can see multiplication and division, they're on the same row. Repeat after me, from left to right. I need you to really focus on this. Instead, what it means is whatever comes first from left to right. So let's imagine that I have something like this, 12 divided by 6 times 2. What do you think I should do first? Should I do the division first or should I do the multiplication first? I do the division first because it comes from left to right first, okay? And the same rule is going to apply whenever you have addition and subtraction. You will work from left to right. Whatever comes first from left to right is what you will do first. All right, we are going to go ahead and do a few examples using these rules. Everyone say PEMDAS. Okay, according to PEMDAS, what does the P stand for, class? Are there any parentheses in problem A? No. How about E? What does E stand for? Exponents. Do you see any of those? No. Next, I have an M and a D on the same line. Multiplication, division. Do you see either of those? Multiplication. Here's what I want you to do. Each time you see the next step that we're supposed to do, I want you to underline just that step. Let's focus on just the underlined part. Class, what is 10 times 5? 50. So that is the answer to this part that I just underlined. Now, what do you think that I need to do to this part that's up here at the beginning? Repeat after me. Drop it down. All right, we are going to drop it down. Now our goal is to get just one operation. The only operation that's left is to add them together. What's 50 plus 50? 100 is the correct answer. All right, so once again, order matters. Let's go to problem B. What does P in PEMDAS stand for, class? Do you see any parentheses? Yes, that means there's some work to do inside the parentheses. Class, what's 3 plus 7? 10. Now remember, we will always underline every step that we're doing. Now I'm going to just bring everything else down. The first step in PEMDAS is P, parentheses. Cade, is there any work I need to do in parentheses? Yes, there is. So let's underline it. What is 6 minus 3? It is 3. Now this can get tricky sometimes. If you notice, there were some parentheses here. I need to bring those down with the problem because that's still saying I need to multiply that. After P for parentheses, what does the E stand for? Exponents. Do I have any E exponents? I do. What should I underline? Okay, underline the 3 squared. Does that mean 3 times 2? No. What does it mean? 3 times 3. What is 3 times 3?
9.
3 times 3 is 9. And then I'm going to drop down the 10. Is this how it should look?
No.
What does that look like?
109.
That looks like 109. Is my answer 109?
No.
What else do I need to drop down? Bring those parentheses down. Remember, when you have a number right next to parentheses, it means I need to do what? Multiply it. What's 10 times 9? And the correct answer is 90. Looking at problem C, do I have any P parentheses? No. How about E exponents? Yes. Everybody underline that. Lila, what is 4 squared? 4 times 4, which is? All right, so I'm going to take my 16 and drop it down. Notice I have something in front of that and behind it. Repeat after me. Drop it down. All right, so we're going to drop down 40 minus divide by 2. Notice there are 2 operations left. I have subtraction and I have division. What should I do first, class? Division. According to PEMDAS, the D comes before the S. So everybody underline. Remember, we will always underline one step, and you can only do one step at a time. Class, what's 16 divided by 2? 8. And now we're going to take this thing in front, 40, and subtraction. We're going to drop it down. What's my answer? 32. All right, this next one is interesting. As I'm looking at it, I don't see any P parentheses, E exponents, but I do see both multiplication and division. Who thinks that I should divide first? Who thinks that I should multiply first? Remember, according to PEMDAS, if you think about it, it goes P, E, M, and D are on the same line, multiplication and division. Do you remember the little note that was next to that? It says from left to right. So I am simply going to look at my problem and I'm going to work whatever comes first from left to right. I can see here division comes first. So I'm going to do that before I do the multiplication. What is 54 divided by 9? 6. Now everything else drops down. Remember, only do one step per line. Next up, I have only multiply and divide left. Which one should I do first? Multiply, because I am working from left to right. 6 times 3? 18. And drop down the divide by 6. What is 18 divided by 6? 3. So our final answer is 3. All right, so this thing that we're going to talk about here is called distributive property. Everyone say distributive property. Have you guys heard of the word distribute before? What do you think distribute means? Think about at the beginning of the year, I distributed class books to you guys for math class. I handed them out, okay? Now, everyone got a math book because I was fair. I gave one to everybody. Think about this. I've got some Starburst here. Would it be nice of me to say, I'm just going to give this to anyone who is wearing a sweater? I just want to give it out to people wearing a sweater. Am I distributing them evenly? Did I distribute evenly? No, I only gave them to a certain group of people. How do you guys feel if you're not wearing a sweater? A little bit sad because these guys got candy. You guys can go ahead and eat your candy. Listen, that's really not that fair. I want you to look at what this says right here. The number outside the parentheses has to be multiplied by everything inside the parentheses. It needs to be fair. If you're going to multiply it by one number, You've got to multiply it by all of the numbers. If I'm going to give candy to some people, I should give candy and distribute it evenly to everyone, even if they're not wearing a sweater today, okay? There you go. Good catches, guys. All right, so I want you to do this with me. You're welcome. Take your red pen, and I want you to multiply this together. This A, as you can see, is outside the parentheses. So I'm going to multiply it by every single number inside the parentheses. Now take your red pen. If I multiplied it by A, I want you to also draw an arrow over here. I have to multiply it by C also. Now, A times B would be AB. Plus, what do you think A times C would be called? AC. Now we're going to use this distributive property to work on a couple of problems. Just remember, any number that is outside the parentheses has to be multiplied by every single number. Be fair, not just by one number, the first or the last, but every single number. So the instructions have asked us to use the distributive property to evaluate the expression. If you would, go ahead and flip to the next page in your notes. What number is outside of my parentheses? The 3. So I'm going to take that and multiply it by the first number. And use your arrows. Anytime that you see this right here, distributive property, you're going to use arrows to show me that you understand now. I am also going to multiply it by the other number that's in the parentheses. So this first part right here is simply saying we're going to multiply 3 times 2. As you can see up here, the operation I have is a plus, so I'm going to drop down the plus. Now, if I multiplied the 3 times 2, what else do I have to multiply that 3 by? 3 times the other number in there, 3 times 3. Then you're simply just going to work from left to right. Jada, what is 3 times 2? 6. John, what is 3 times 3?
9.
Cade, what is 6 plus 9? 15. Now, you don't need to write down this next part, but I do want to explain something to you. Just a minute ago, we had talked about PEMDAS, or order of operations. What does P in PEMDAS stand for?
Parentheses.
Parentheses. So watch this. If I underline the parentheses, what's 2 plus 3? 5. But then I also have to bring down 3 and multiply. What's 3 times 5? 15. Did we get the same answer on the first and second way we did it? Yes, look, it's the same answer as over there, okay? The difference is if your instructions ask you to use distributive property, you have to make sure that you do it this first way. Okay, so that's just showing you there's 2 different ways to get the same answer. You might look at this and see and think, why would I ever do it this long way? Right now it's me teaching you because in the future you're going to have things where you're multiplying things by like x's and y's. So you have to understand the concept, which is why we're doing it. Even though it looks simple right now and it seems like we should do it this way, I'm just trying to teach you how to do distributive property. Okay, we're going to do one more example for problem B. What number is outside of my parentheses? 4. So remember, the instructions are asking us to use distributive property. So we're going to go ahead and take this and multiply it times that first number in parentheses, and I also have to multiply it by the second number in the parentheses. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is 4 times 50. What is 4 times 50? 200. What sign do you see in the middle of my parentheses? Subtract. So I'm going to drop down the subtraction sign. Now I still have to multiply the 4 by what other number? 4 times the 3, because I've got to be fair. Oh, sorry, I should be doing this. I want you to show me the work this way. 4 times 50 minus 4 times 3. Sorry about that. All right, so she just told us it was 200, and 4 times 3 is 12. And guys, what is 200 minus 12? 188. With mental math, just kind of think about it. If you were to do 200 minus 10, you'd have 190. Subtract 2 more, and you get 188. All right, this next part is a review. We've got 12 plus negative 12 equals 0. 50 plus negative 50 equals 0. Here's a few other examples. 30 plus negative 30 equals 0. 20 plus negative 20 equals 0. That's a number and its opposite. A number and its opposite will always equal 0. Do you guys remember what that is called? It starts with an I. We talked about this a little bit in chapter 1. Another name for opposite. The word was inverse. Okay, this is the inverse property of addition, telling me that a number and its opposite will always equal 0. Now I want to show you something. On your test that we had yesterday, I had a problem that said negative 60 minus 60. Is that a number and its opposite? No. What would this have had to say to be an opposite? That would have had to be a positive. Okay, so a lot of people told me negative 60 minus 60 was 0, but what should they have told me it was? Negative 120, because that's the same sign. You got to add the numbers and keep the sign. Okay, next up, I want you to look at these. 2 times negative 3 times negative 4, 2 times negative 4 times negative 3. They look very similar, but can someone explain to me what's different about those two? What is it?
They're both switched.
The order is switched. Do you remember that big long word that I told you that you are allowed to switch the order of numbers? Not distributive. We didn't talk about it today. We talked about it in chapter 1. Nope. Commutative. Remember we talked about commuting from home to school. We move from home to school. We drive there. Right here, you're allowed to move numbers around, and that is called the commutative property. Now, you are only allowed to move it around if it's multiplication or addition. You cannot move them around with dividing and subtracting because you will get a different answer. Okay? So there is no homework for tonight. This is just basically an intro to chapter 1.